Just Dr. Josh Eachus. Josh, welcome back, sir. How are you?
Doing okay, Brian. How are you today?
Doing very well. So in Marissa Nuzzo's forecast throughout the morning, she's been saying, and this is the proper terminology, but I don't think it gives the proper level of alert, a 4 out of 5 moderate risk. The National Weather Service lists risks as marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, or high. Moderate is a lot more dangerous than it sounds, is it not?
It is, yeah. That's something we've been dealing with for years is communicating these risk categories and terminology. And as you may or may not know, marginal enhanced were only added a couple of years ago, so we kind of had some more levels. And, you know, weather messaging as a whole is just a challenge in terms of properly communicating risk and probability. And, you know, that's where we are with moderate. That's why I kind of like just the numbered system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bet
Right.
4 out of 5, as anybody would be able to tell us towards the top of the range. And they're fairly rare around here. The Baton Rouge Metro, the city of Baton Rouge itself, has only been a moderate risk 4 times since 2011. This is the 5th. So it's not that usual. And I just to add some context to it, you know, it's still severe weather, and they still are on slam dunk. This is you talk about getting into 30 or 40% chances of nasty weather. Now, if there was a 40% chance of rain, we'd probably go on without our day. 40% chance of severe weather, though, is much, much, much higher than any given day where the chance is like 0.001. So it is amplified, but it certainly isn't a guarantee, and we don't expect the entire area to get mowed down by a tornado today. But what we do know is that within our, you know, our 13 parish, 3-county area, there are probably going to be a couple of storm reports today, and that should have us all on alert because it could happen to you. Just, you know, not certain that it will happen to you.
Yeah, it's like a hurricane season. It becomes a serious hurricane season when one hits you. This is on a much more micro level. We at the start of the show this morning, CBS was reporting that 17 tornadoes had touched down before the storm even left Texas. Is there a way to track whether or not this is strengthening in intensity? Does it peter out along the way? Does a storm like this maintain where it's at as it goes? What are we looking at?
Sure. No, there is. And it's not really, this is not like a hurricane where it in and of itself is its own engine and feature that strengthens and weakens on its own. We kind of look at the ingredients that you kind of always, you know, vaguely talk about on the air without getting too technical. Mm-hmm. And those ingredients change as the storm system advances from one place to the other. And the ingredients are changing by the minute, typically, because they have to do with winds at several different layers in the atmosphere and the amount of moisture that's available at one place or the other versus warmth. And what we are seeing today is that overnight there has been a slight shift in the most favorable winds in the atmosphere for severe weather just to the north and west of Baton Rouge. Now, there's been a small modification in where that moderate risk has been positioned. That's been expanded a little bit farther to the north and trimmed a little bit south and east of Baton Rouge. But the city is still included, and all locations north of I-12 are included still. And, you know, even if they weren't, we would say, well, I mean, we're still in a level 3 out of 5. Some of the ingredients are still there. It's not a let your guard down kind of time. This is really the weather forecasters trying to find a bullseye as to where the most favorable ingredients are. Doesn't mean it can't happen outside of it. You know, if you go to the shooting range, the bow and arrow, or sometimes you're going to hit the bullseye, sometimes you're going to be right around that bullseye, and that's how it'll work out today.
Intensity and duration, what are we looking at?
This is actually going to be, overall, I think, a short-lived worry for our area, which is one good thing. The other good thing is that it's during the day. Our one last week that kind of, you know, fizzled out was overnight. But you know, a lot of the day is going to be dry, and I know that'll get really frustrating for people that had to adjust today because of the school closures and whatnot, and say, look, it's not even raining, and my kids aren't at school. But it does look as though we're going to have some active weather between about noon and 4 or 5 o'clock, which is going to be right in the middle of the afternoon. Would be prime drive time home for commuters from work and also school. And we will have, you know, a line passing through our area. So we look at this 4 or 5 hour window where we should have some pretty intense thunderstorms. Warnings or not, they'll likely have some gusty wind and some heavy rain, decent amount of lightning. And, of course, along that line, you know, north to south from the coast into southwest Mississippi, I would expect a couple of warnings to be needed along that line for the possibility of a brief tornado or some damaging wind gusts. And that's how we are leaning towards the action playing out today with pretty high confidence. I have lower confidence in that maybe we could see a storm cell or two develop ahead of the line, and those would be the ones that would be most suspicious or suspect for maybe becoming tornadic.
Yeah, the tornadic ones out in front of the squall line. It's impossible to predict where they would land. I mean, this is as random as the day is long.
Yeah.
As far as this storm itself, though, when I look at duration to have like some level of historical comp, and naturally I'm going to think back to last May. That lasted a lot longer than what this is looking at.
Oh yeah, that was wasn't even really a squall line. It was just a stalling swath of widespread rain that didn't move. This will be pretty progressive. I'm not going to say we won't have some standing water on the road because you get a quick inch or two in an hour around here, and we're going to have some, trouble spots, nuisance spots that hold water. But I can see no world where this is like last May. Last May didn't really involve a progressive upper-level storm and frontal system like this either, and this front should be booking pretty good by the time it gets into our region.
When it comes down to it, how much water would it take to affect things on the rivers and whatnot? And are we even or is it looking like it would be anything close to having river levels rise to flood stage?
Oh no, it just maybe your minor creeks could come up, but the Amite, the Tickfall, the Tangipahoe, they're just way too low because it's been so dry lately. Our ground can handle a ton of runoff. We've even seen, just on a non-weather related standpoint, a lot of the crews around the parish areas really have been pulling a lot of debris out of the waterways, and that's going to go a long way for us too, I believe. I've noticed the water levels dropping in the channels that they've cleared things out of because water's been able to move along. So I just don't think it's possible for us to reach a level of rainfall today that would cause us any major flooding issues.
That being said, beyond this storm rolling through, it's looking like nothing but dry weather till at least next week as well. From a historical perspective, this is remarkably dry.
It has been. We've been in a drought pattern since the beginning of the year, fortunately with no major impacts because we live in an area where the soils are so moist. Mm-hmm. But we are running at about a 4 to 5 inch deficit for the year right now. It's one of the reasons we can tolerate so much rain. I assume we're going to work ourselves out of that as we get into the warm season because we get our daily showers and thunderstorms. There's not much that's going to change that. But that's a good thing, priming us for a spring season where we can have some heavy rain events coming in on the drier side will help us out. But if we start, stacking these up one after another, it can be a problem. But like you said, after today can pretty much promise we're going about 5 or 6 days without rain and 7 or 8 days with largely quiet weather.
WBRZ's Dr. Josh Eachus, WBRZ's chief meteorologist. Josh, before I let you go, I know once events like this start, for the duration, y'all are kind of hunkered down a little bit. But have you had a chance to talk to any colleagues from any news stations to the west of us to know what they've already gotten?
Other than our interactions on Twitter, no, they've been very minimal. But what was yesterday's outbreak of tornadoes in eastern Texas is going to be fairly historic. It's a little early in the year for South Texas. Everybody kind of knows the terminology Tornado Alley, which is generally north-central Texas into Oklahoma and Kansas, Nebraska. For South and East Texas, that number of tornadoes, which we believe right now is on the count of about 17 for late March, is quite early. And those were substantial tornadoes. They weren't weak. And on top of that, where they were touching down, just by bad luck of the draw, I mean, we saw Round Rock just outside of Austin take a hit. It looks as though parts of College Station near the campus of A&M took a hit. Some of the suburbs outside of Dallas took a hit. So they were unfortunately and unluckily striking populated areas yesterday. So once the dust settles around here, and weather kind of quiets down around the country, I think, national weather will start to kind of hone back in on that story. That was a pretty substantial Texas tornado outbreak.
Yeah, we've been seeing CBS News has been in New Orleans this morning. Ginger Z, meteorologist from Good Morning America, is in Brandon, Mississippi right now. It feels like this is an all hands on deck for something that may or may not be.
Yeah, and that's the way these need to be treated. It's a long slog, and I talk about this on the air a lot. I sense it by the end of May and June. Viewers, people on social media tend to get very frustrated with us because we get put in outlook for severe weather almost once a week now for the next 2 or 3 months. And 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 of these produces. I try to use kind of the kitchen analogy always. We can put all of the ingredients for the gumbo in the kitchen, but that doesn't mean there's going to be somebody there to make the gumbo. And right now, the limitation of meteorology is that we can see that the ingredients are out there. They're certainly more expensive today than They will be tomorrow, or they were yesterday. But we need all of them to come together at exactly the right time, and we need something there to trigger them, to get them going. And we have to communicate that, because it's too big of a risk to take for us to try to predict whether these triggers will be available or not when all those ingredients are there, and we say, I don't think it could happen, and somebody gets struck by a tornado. That's far worse. I'd rather deal with seeing the ingredients and nothing happening than ignoring the ingredients and something happening.
100%. He is WBRZ's chief meteorologist, Dr. Josh Eachus. We're going to do some emergency coverage around midday today. Let's hook back up then once we're in it.
That sounds good, Brian. I will be there. We're all hands on deck over the station, so we should have somebody available to chat if you guys want to get in touch.
Greatly appreciated. Thanks, Josh.
Take care.
You too. Coming up on Your Money Now in a little bit over a minute from right now. I appreciate WBRZ's chief meteorologist, Dr. Josh Eachus. The weirdest part about that, though, is, yeah, it does need to be all hands on deck. You don't know where tornadoes will land. You don't know where tornadoes will touch down. Like he said, all the ingredients are there, and we're going to get upset if no one's in the kitchen to make the gumbo, and it's setting the tone for the spring, which leads us into hurricane season in June. And then where's our level of intensity? Where's our level of being proactive once we get there? Anyway, we'll have our eyes on it. We're going to go live at noon today. I'm going to step in on Brian Kilmeade for just a minute, or I shouldn't say for just a minute. After we have 2 hours of Kilmeade, we're going to step in for the third hour of the show to make sure that everyone who is getting out of work at noon, getting out of school at noon, on the roads at noon, can get to and from where they're going safely as the storm bears down on us, with the hopes that we just walk in here and have absolutely nothing to say. That is the ideal. To walk in here, fire up the mics, Kevin Ford, myself, Chuck P. will be on the board, walk in here, fire it all up on YouTube, on air, and say, we got nothing for you. Go about your lives. Godspeed.